Welcome to the College Neuro Network, a podcast series part of Simply Neuroscience's The Synapse. My name is Sasha.
And my name is Sarah, and we're your hosts for today. The College Neuro Network has discussions with undergraduate students studying neuroscience and neuroscience professors in order to gain insight into the neuroscience department and opportunities in the nation's top universities.
Today's episode is focused on Yale University, a private Ivy League research university in New Haven, Connecticut. With its hundreds of study, research, and internship opportunities, passionate student body, and diverse curriculum, Yale ranks number 3 in national universities by the U.S. News & World Report.
Today, joining us is Mitchell Ostro, an undergraduate at Yale University. Welcome, Mitchell. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss your experiences at Yale as a student studying neuroscience.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So for our first question for you, we wanted to ask if you could briefly introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about how you got interested in neuroscience.
Sure. So I am a rising senior at Yale, and I am double majoring in neuroscience and statistics and data science. So I went to a private school in Atlanta, Georgia that was also STEM focused. And I never really was like a neuroscience guy back then, but I definitely appreciated STEM. I think BC calculus was my favorite class in high school, if that says anything. But then going onwards, I began to become interested in psychology when I took a class called Thinking my freshman fall at Yale. That really exposed me to like how cool it was to study the human mind. But that being said, I was still like a STEM guy at that point, and studying psychology didn't really seem super appealing to me because it wasn't quantitative or biological or really like scientific enough. Jump forward to the next semester. My plan at that point in the spring of freshman year was to study cognitive science, which is obviously very similar to neuroscience. You might say neuroscience is like a branch of cognitive science in a couple domains at least. So that was definitely very appealing to me as well, but that didn't seem rigorous enough, mainly because of the major at Yale, where you sort of take like whatever class you want, because pretty much everything is cognitive science. But my professor, Paul Bloom, this was an intro psych class that I took freshman spring. He had a really long unit in neuroscience, which is basic neuroscience, and that just sort of connected all the dots for me. So the summer afterwards, I was studying abroad, and I decided to take a couple of Coursera courses actually on neuroscience. And that just kind of did it for me. I realized I wanted to study neuroscience at that point, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to major in it until the fall afterwards, when I took like the foundational courses in the major, and it just blew me away. So I've stuck with it ever since. I've definitely like changed paths in neuroscience itself, because it's such a broad field. I think going into it, I wanted to go down the realm of like mental health and psychiatry, but upon studying that for maybe a year and a half, I realized that also just didn't answer my questions, and so now I'm trying to become a computational neuroscientist, which is why the double major.
That's amazing. We're always so excited to ask that question because we hear such like diverse answers for how people get involved in neuroscience. And I think it's really funny because I also just finished a course. What did you say, edX, or did you say Coursera?
Coursera, yeah.
Coursera. I just finished a course on there too. It was a Harvard neuroscience course, and that's like just confirmed my interest in neuroscience as well. So I think that's really cool.
It's really a great way to pass your time, especially nowadays. I've sort of moved away from Coursera at this point because most of the courses do seem to be a little introductory. Now, honestly, like I just read a bunch of papers. Yeah, it's really about just the wandering track of exploration that I think led me.
Yeah, for sure. So our next question for you is, what factors drew you specifically to committing to Yale University for your undergraduate studies?
Sure. So like I said, I was not interested in neuroscience going into college, so that was not a factor at all. I mean, obviously, the educational quality of going to Yale is the key point. But there was so much more to that decision. I think the three factors I was really looking for in my college experience was community, music. I was a really big trombone player in high school. less so now just because of the time commitment, but that was really a factor that drew me to Yale. And then the ability to have a small college feel while also being in a city was something that's pretty rare. And I think Yale checked off all of those boxes for me. And obviously is a great STEM school, even if like people don't think it's a STEM school, which is not true. Yeah, so Yale is the only Ivy League with an actual music school. And I had actually considered going to a conservatory at some point in high school. So I wanted to keep up my trombone playing and also just be in a great community. And Yale has this residential college system, which is actually the background of my Zoom screen. This is my college. It's named after Pauli Murray, and this has really just been the foundation of like the social structure at Yale, and it's just so much fun. And the friends I made freshman year, I still get to live with and see every day. Not now, obviously, but yeah, it was just these factors were just so unique for any of the schools that I was looking at. And I remember on my visit, and this was the only school I had felt this. Just walking down one of the streets, I could actually like see myself being there. I remember telling myself that, and none of the other schools really gave me that gut feeling.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. Like Yale really is truly like a liberal arts college embedded in this larger research university. So you really have the diversity to like play an instrument while also pursuing a very STEM focused field. So that's really cool to hear that. And kind of just focusing more towards like Yale's neuroscience department. In your opinion, what do you think really makes Yale's neuroscience department different from neuroscience departments of other universities?
Sure. So that's a good question. Yale Neuroscience, up until 2017, was not a single department. It's a very distributional field of study. I mean, it is, I would say, the most interdisciplinary study of any life science. So there are just people studying neuroscience, professors studying neuroscience in so many different departments in the university. It's mostly in the medical school, so you have the neurology and the psychiatry departments, and then there's the biology departments, which is molecular, cellular, developmental biology, and then molecular biophysics and biochemistry departments, which study more of the cellular components. And then, of course, there's the psychology department, which is just like right in the center of campus because it's really a foundational like unit of study for Yale. So it's very broad and it's very spread out. But that being said, it has started to coalesce and come together as this one unit of research when the neuroscience department was founded in 2017. And that was actually when the major was created as well. So it's a little bit new and they're still like going through some administrative changes. But I think because everything has been separate for a while, they've had the ability to really spread out the research focus and also go deep into these specific features of research as well.
Right, yeah, we've talked to a couple Yale professors before this, and they kind of noted the exact same thing, how even though it is a new kind of department overall, it's so interdisciplinary, and that's like one of the strongest things about Yale's neuroscience. And
Yeah.
so,
Who did you talk to?
oh, we talked to Professor Crystal.
John Crystal.
Yes.
Yeah, he was actually the one who set me up with my first PI.
Oh wow,
That's so amazing.
Yeah, he's the head of the psychiatry department. I remember. Actually, I'll probably tell the story later on. So, I guess I can tell it now if you want. The neuroscience department has these, or at least they had. I don't know if they kept doing them at least this last semester. Basically, they have like these meet and greets with the professors, and they have I don't know. It's like 20 to 30 or 40 professors coming in, and they're just there for the undergraduates to talk to. And I spoke with John Crystal. This was just like I think it was the fall of sophomore year, right? So when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to do neuroscience, and I spoke to him, and like our backgrounds really matched up, and I was able to sort of like see myself in him, even though that doesn't necessarily make sense because he's a lot older than me. But yeah, it was this really like the sense of connection that really drew me in.
Yeah, that's so
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he talked a lot about how much he enjoyed working with undergrads and everything at Yale. So that's really cool that you know him. And kind of moving on to our next question. So you talked a little bit or touched on the different psychology and neuroscience classes offered at Yale. So we were wondering if you could talk about your favorite class and why.
Okay. Can it be a three-way tie?
Yeah, sure.
Well, yes. So the classes that I'm thinking of are very different. And I think they are my favorite classes in terms of a couple different factors. So my first favorite class was the Intro to Neuroscience class called the Human Brain. And that was basically just like a huge crash course in neuroscience. I think it covered like everything in one semester, which is a really, really hard feat to do. And it was very intense. I think I like my Google Doc notebook is something like 130 pages long for that.
Wow.
But that's just like it was just such a good class in terms of content. And it was so fun to hear those lectures because it really was like when you're first experienced to these ideas, like the big ideas, it's always a mind-blowing experience. And it gets hard, it gets progressively harder to find those ideas, but they're still out there. I actually just read an amazing paper that also blew my mind this week. But like just getting those every single week in lectures was amazing, and that was also one of the other features that drew me in. The next class that was one of my favorites was actually a graduate neuroscience class. So Yale allows undergraduates to take graduate classes, and surprisingly, a lot of them are not as like super rigorous for grad students, typically because grad students tend to focus on the research. This was like an intro grad student class. It was called Biological Bases of Behavior. And every week, a new professor would come in and would talk about their research and it would talk about the specific field. So these are like world experts of all of these different subsets of neuroscience talking like about what they do and the big strides that are being made in their specific fields of neuroscience. So that was also just so much fun to be in. The last one is clinical neuroscience. This was a seminar I took this past semester, and it was much more contemporary research focused. So it was entirely like a paper-based class. We'd read and discuss academic papers every single week, and just the ability, like at that point, to have these hard discussions for 2 hours a week consecutively. So it was like Mondays from 9 to 11:15, and just taking 2 hours just to sit and just digest these concepts and discuss them was also just so much fun.
Wow, those sound like a dream to like be in a class like that. Like since both me and Sarah are still in high school, really the only exposure to neuroscience we have in school is biology classes or psychology classes. So to hear that's like an opportunity when if you go to Yale, that's just incredible. Um, and then kind of adding on to that question, we were wondering if you had a favorite professor, and if you could talk about them.
Yeah. So my favorite professor that I've taken classes from was actually my professor for both biological bases of behavior and clinical neuroscience. So he's a psych professor named Avram Holmes, and I really liked him because he was able to break down these concepts in a way that was understandable for an undergrad, but also didn't feel like he was like talking down. Like in a seminar, I like we were able just to go like back and forth having these discussions, and I mean I like to think that he was getting as much out of it as I was. So it really felt like I was actually building a relationship with this professor, and it was really enjoyable.
Yeah, that's incredible. We've talked to a couple professors over the course of this series,
Mhm.
and we've heard a lot how professors absolutely love learning from their students, maybe even more so than teaching their students. So that's incredible to hear at Yale. That's how it is too. And then speaking of professors, we wanted to ask like how accessible are professors at Yale, and is it easy to get in touch with them for help or for research opportunities?
Sure. So I think it depends on the professor for sure. And it depends on the class if you're trying to get in touch with your course professor. So there are like really large lectures, right, which are typically intro classes or intermediate classes that everyone in the major has to take. And those, it usually is a little bit harder to get in touch with the professors and like foster a relationship, but you can still talk to them. I mean, they always have office hours. like every professor always sticks around after a class to answer questions that students have. In the smaller classes, it's much easier. And I think in terms of professors, there are a lot of professors who are, sort of like tenured and just focusing on big ideas and maybe like working with grad students and postdocs. And those types of professors are definitely less responsive, but I don't think there are that many of those. And oftentimes it's not that they don't want to talk to you, it's just that they're so busy that they might not be able to respond to an email. But yeah, from almost all of my experiences, the professors are incredibly accessible. They'll be happy to sit down and chat with you, happy to have you in their lab and work with them. It's just all you really need to do is just show interest.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. Our next question is, was there anything you found surprising or unexpected about being a student at Yale?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that it is a liberal arts college, like you said. But I think that doesn't necessarily just mean like all these different non-STEM fields are being studied. It's also just the way they interact and the way that people can be involved in all sides of academia and courses and students. It's really just like it's a singular community. It's really not divided. And through this, I've become, I think, much more well versed and interested in like politics, philosophy, literature, and it's crazy because I would not have even considered liking those in high school. And honestly, I also definitely I would say that neuroscience increases the curiosity to studying these fields, right? Because it's the brain that's generating these thoughts, it's the brain that's generating these behaviors. So coming at these more traditionally liberal arts fields from a neuroscientific background is a lot of fun.
Our next question is, how demanding is it to study neuroscience at Yale? And you also mentioned previously that you're a double major. So we were kind of wondering what your like general, I know this changes a lot, but general day-to-day schedule kind of looks like.
Yeah, so I think you can take okay, so it definitely depends on the classes you're taking, and it depends on extracurriculars. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it changes day to day. I would say it can be as hard as you want it to be, and it can be as easy as you want it to be, like up to a point, right?
Mhm.
So I've had schedules where I've had like 5 rigorous classes in one day, or 4 classes in like a I haven't been in school for so long, I'm blanking out. Like a study hall TA session. I've had like that's like 5 hours or 6 hours of classes in one day. Just I've had semesters where it doesn't feel like it's nonstop. So like midterm season, right? When all the tests come up starts and it lasts like a month all the way until finals. But then there are also semesters where you have like 3 days of classes per week, and you only have 1 to 2 classes in those days, and maybe you just have a lot of reading or you have writing. So it really depends. I think I'm of the mindset where I don't think it's worthwhile if it's not hard. Like I don't think I'd be taking advantage of what Yale's offering to me. So I have tried to make it hard, and that also is why I'm double majoring. Um, but I think like if you really just enjoy the courses and you actually appreciate what you're learning, it doesn't really feel like it's that bad. That's a little bit of a vague answer, but yeah, that's my general mindset. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I know it's kind of hard to give like a really specific answer because your guys' schedules change so much. Um, but our next question is, have you had the opportunity to conduct research at Yale? And if so, what did you research and how did you obtain the opportunity?
Yeah, so I've had 2, maybe 3 research experiences. I think freshman year when I was just, well, 3 rigorous ones and then a couple other ones. Freshman year when I was first like exploring, I joined a psych lab, and they were super excited to have me. I got to like, you know, test out the equipment and learn about what they were studying. But when I transitioned to neuroscience, I decided to go into something more related to neuroscience. Yeah, but then since then, I've really been in 2 main labs. I was in one lab from sophomore year until the end of, no, really just the end of sophomore year. But I got the ability to do an independent research project the summer after my sophomore year, and this was in a psychiatry lab. So I was working with a postdoc who was my supervisor, and I was running a behavioral experiment on how histamine affects stereotypic behavior. So this is much more related to psychiatry. This is like mouse models of neuroscience. But it was at that point I was still definitely exploring. After that, I joined a primate lab, and I'm doing more computational work. So in this lab, I'm modeling macaque behavior on basically like this random two-choice forced task, and that's been an independent project since January. Although I'm starting to like help out the lab a little bit more this fall because I'm going to be taking a gap semester. Yeah, so those are the main two neuroscience projects. I've also been able to do a statistics and data science research project in deep learning last semester as well. So that was with like a visiting professor for a course. But yeah, it's super easy to get in touch with the professors, and they're always really excited to have undergraduates. It was also really easy to like ask if I could do an independent project, which I think was the right decision because I was able to really design my own studies, conduct my own studies, draw conclusions, really just like trial by fire research experience, which is something that's like I think it's the single thing that's helped me grow the most in terms of neuroscience. But yeah, so I guess to get in touch with these professors, I read a couple of their papers to make sure that I was interested in their topic, and then I emailed them and I said, "Hey, can I work with you?" And the answer is just yes. And then we met and we talked about interests and we talked about potential projects. Then I just started working with them, and they're super excited. I was super excited. I think the first professor I had was like so smart, just like crazy, and I always felt intimidated talking to him. But even so, like he was so welcoming to have me there, and I mean, the relationship of a student and a mentor is to ask stupid questions fundamentally, because most of the questions that I had were questions that he knew or thought were obvious, but that doesn't matter because he would still answer them and I would still learn a lot.
It's so awesome that professors are so open to like working with undergraduates with research.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, this past semester, because I was mainly working on independent research projects and I was directly advised by a professor rather than a grad student, which I think is a very rare thing to have. And I was taking a couple like graduate seminars. It really felt like I had actually become a graduate student in neuroscience at that point, as opposed to an undergraduate. So that was very exciting. I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
So our next question is, what is your favorite thing about studying neuroscience at Yale?
Sure. So my favorite thing about the major is that it's so flexible. There are a bunch of different options you can take. I mean, it's a very rigorous course load. It's about 50% heavier than most other majors, but it's really interdisciplinary, like neuroscience, and so it provides you the ability to take like most STEM classes, and inevitably they'll be connected to neuroscience because, like I said, like what STEM class isn't? So like I've gotten to take math classes that I had no idea were related to neuroscience just because they were included, and then a year later they show up in like my research. So that was really cool. Definitely, like we said, the professors, the people, the community is very open, welcoming, and excited to have people there. Professors are always excited to talk about the research, like I mentioned with the meet and greets. The neuroscience department also provides like swag and sushi to those events, so that was super exciting.
Yeah, those definitely sound like pluses. That's incredible to hear that there's so many, you have so many favorite things about studying neuroscience at Yale, and it's very exciting for prospective high school students applying.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of moving on to some advice. So we were asking if you had any tips on how high school students might get involved in neuroscience, in terms of extracurriculars or maybe organizations.
Sure. So I would say there are two things I wish I did. And I'll give myself a pass on this because I wasn't interested in neuroscience. But if you are, yeah, there's no time like the present to get started. So number one, just read as much as you can. There are so many great resources for people trying to get interested in neuroscience, whether it's from a lay perspective or an academic perspective. Most books I would say are not as like academic, and they're more centered towards non-neuroscientists, but there are a few out there that are like really heavy and hard to get through. But I think those are the ones that you get the most out of. Also, just academic papers. Find some topic you're interested in. Just do like a Google Scholar search. So that's on one side. In terms of experience, just find a university near you, look up some professors, see what their interests are, read a few of their papers. If you like them, just email them, and I'm sure they'll be happy to work with you. I wish I had done that. I think that would have been really cool. I think I would be a couple of years ahead of where I am now. But you know, that doesn't really matter. But I think that would be the best way to get experience. Oh, and like you said, well, you're doing some edX classes, which I highly recommend. There are also some more developed courses in terms of like straight from university courses or developed for neuroscientists out there. So I just finished the Neuromatch Academy, which is like this interactive computational methods for neuroscience course. That was like 3 weeks long, and it was very rigorous, but I definitely got a lot out of it. And there's no reason that a high school student couldn't start one of those as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, especially because from your perspective, you didn't really get into neuroscience until college. So it just goes to show that there's so many different paths to take. And to really start now would be an amazing thing, like you were saying, starting classes and reading more.
Also, don't worry about like trying to figure it out immediately. Like if you don't find something that's interested, then just move on to a new thing. You have the ability to just like make 180s.
Yeah. So our last question for you is, we were wondering if you had any advice for the high school students listening who want to apply to Yale to study neuroscience or honestly anything in the near future.
For applying to Yale, I would say I don't think anybody is. I think what they look for and what a lot of these schools look for is just like intellectual curiosity and drive and just like it's like the building blocks of a good student or like a good academic. It's not necessarily like they're world leaders in anything. Like it doesn't that doesn't matter if you. I mean, if you're doing well in school and you show interest in what you're doing, and maybe you've like achieved a couple things in those, like going into the application process. I don't think I was like a huge like standout. Maybe not student, but like a huge like my application didn't like aggressively stand out. Like my main achievements in high school were I was captain of the cross country team. I was president of the band, and I did like my only extracurriculars that I did outside of school were music and running. So I wasn't super. Oh, and I actually did volunteer a lot, so I guess that was a little bit. That was definitely helpful. But yeah, it was really just like a couple things, and I did them well. And then obviously I was good at school, and I was interested in what I was doing. But from there, it's really just about like making your story unique. And if neuroscience is what that is to you, and if that's what's going to make you unique, then just like go all in. Honestly, I think the worst thing that happens is maybe you realize at the end of it, like you don't really like neuroscience, and then you don't major in it. It's like that's not the end of the world. There are plenty of other fascinating careers and interesting jobs. So I just say don't be worried and take your time to figure it out. And whatever it is, just go for it. Explore, exploit. I'm getting too mathematical now, so I'll stop talking.
No, that's great advice. I think especially for high schoolers right now, it's really easy to get stressed out comparing yourself to others, but really it's very grounding to hear that all you need is really a passion for something and a curiosity and a drive to study something in university. That's really great to hear. And that basically wraps up our questions for you. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today for the College Neuro Network. Your responses were so insightful, and they'll definitely help any high school students listening who are researching colleges and are interested in majoring or minoring in neuroscience.
Great. I'm glad to hear that, and thank you again for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so nice to get to talk to you.